Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Life in the Wildlands podcast, where we discuss exciting opportunities with outdoor careers, share professional experiences, and provide advice to overcome the hurdles to federal employment. I am your host, Becky Schufelt, and today we have Riva Duncan, who is a retired wildland firefighter, and she's going to share how she started her career and provide advice for those that want to enter into a wildland firefighting career. Thank you for joining us, Riva.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me here. I'm super passionate about our profession in the natural resources. My name is Riva Duncan, and I officially retired in December of 2020 after 31 years with the U.S. Forest Service. I had started out in timber, but then moved into fire. And when I retired, I was the fire staff officer for the Umpqua National Forest in Southwest Oregon.
Wow, 31 years. That's a pretty good career, isn't it?
Right? Hard to believe.
So tell us, how did you start your career in wildland fire, and how did you get to where you were before you retired?
I actually have a forestry degree. And when I was in forestry school, I graduated from Purdue University. And back then, people would find it hard to believe, people are recently hired in or looking for jobs right now, but it was nearly impossible to get a permanent job with the Forest Service back then. And we were told in forestry school over and over, none of you in this class will ever work permanently for the U.S. Forest Service. It was so hard to get a permanent job. There were people who would work as temporaries for literally 10, 15, 20 years without ever getting a permanent appointment. So
I thought it was bad when I had to put in 8 seasons before I got my permanent position. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and it was crazy. And I just did not have any interest in that kind of life. I grew up, we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of income security, right? My mom raised 4 kids on her own, and it was always a struggle. And I just did not want to struggle. And so I didn't even want to be a temporary. I had no interest in it. And I was followed a boy after college to Pennsylvania. He worked for a veneer log company. And I just started applying for jobs with consulting foresters. So I got hired just for the summer by this really, really great man named Keith Horn, small family business, consulting forester, and worked for the summer for him. And he said, I just don't have room to hire you on. His daughter worked, she was his office manager. His son was another forester. And he said, I'd love to hire you, but we're just too small. He said, what about the Forest Service? And I told him I wasn't interested in being a temp. And he said, well, you should bid on some contracts. They do all kinds of contracts, stocking surveys, seedling counts, all this. And so I did that. I bid on contracts the next summer and won a contract, and then did a subcontract for another guy. And after that was done, I was literally thinking about going back to school for something different, and was working at Rite Aid Pharmacy. And the guy who was my contracting officer's rep called me and said, hey, do you want to work for the Forest Service? And I said, well, I don't want to be a temporary for my whole life. And he said, oh, we've got this new hiring authority that we can actually hire direct, and we're flying a trainee forester position you should put in.
Riva, what was this hiring authority that you got eventually hired under?
It was like, it was kind of like demo. So it was before demo though. So this was the first time that actual forest got to hire their own person and advertise a job locally. So much like demo, but it was a weird special hiring authority that had been approved in the late 80s because they needed more foresters. So it was only for foresters, entry-level trainee foresters.
Hold on. And for our audience out there, demo, what she's referring to is the process in which applications with the federal government are open to the general public, which a lot are not these days.
Right. So I filled out an SF-171. That was the old application form in ink wrote it out in pen. This was
Like an
1989.
too.
Yeah. And sent it in and got a call a few weeks later and they offered me the job. I mean, I was just shocked. So they had been doing these job fairs back then, and they were going to hire foresters under this authority at these job fairs. And they'd actually offered the job to three other people right out of college who all turned it down because it didn't pay enough, which I don't understand because, we were told also we'd make more money selling shoes, than being in forestry. So, we all knew, like, yeah, we knew we weren't going to get rich, but it was to my fortune that those people turned it down, and they offered me the job as a trainee forester, 579. So I'm a rare Forest Service employee who never worked one day as a temp and got my first job was permanent.
Well,
And
you're one of the lucky ones.
yes, I know how fortunate I am with that. And so I started working in the Allegheny National Forest is in Northwest Pennsylvania, and it's known as an asbestos forest. We didn't have any, we'd have maybe 2 or 3 fires a year. That was about it. And they were all small. And, and back then also, we would have several slow fire seasons nationally. And so we didn't even get a lot of opportunities in the East to go fight fire in the West, maybe every 3 or 4 years. And I didn't get that opportunity until I'd been working for almost 5 years. And, took fire training locally, went to my guard school, went to fight those tiny little fires. And then in 94, big fire season in 94, they were sending Eastern crews to the West to fight fire. And I got on a Type 2 IA crew and absolutely fell in love with fire. I mean, I was just like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And so I was married at the time, so I wasn't very mobile. And then I started thinking about, I was encouraged to put in for one of the developmental hotshot crews. So at that time, Redmond, Oregon, Redding, California, and Asheville, North Carolina. And so I put in for Asheville because they were the first ones. And I thought, well, if I don't get on that crew, then I'll apply for Redding and Redmond. And I got on Asheville Hotshots in 1996 and really kind of solidified that I wanted to shift my career from timber into fire after that experience. And I was able to do that. But I feel like my forestry degree and my forestry background has really served me well because I feel like I speak the language, right, with foresters, natural resource people. So it's, I think having that background and starting out as a forester was really beneficial for me.
And it really probably gave you a good foundation of how the agency works and
Right.
all the knowledge, to understand where you needed to go in your career just by getting a little bit of experience, maybe not in the position that, you felt that was your forever long career path, but you were able to find that through exploring a different job through the Forest Service.
Right. And, having a different perspective on the other side of the house and being part of the militia for a long time, right? So I can definitely identify with that. Being a trainee forester, they were developing me, so I got a lot of opportunities, to attend a forest leadership team meeting, when I was a low level, grunt field person. And, being in a trainee position gave me a lot of those opportunities to kind of see the inner workings that maybe I might not have been exposed to for several more years. So that was really helpful too.
And you mentioned the militia. Can you explain more on that?
Yeah, so it's not a great term, but we all still use it. So for the non-Forest Service folks, that's the not people that are not in fire positions. So again, like foresters, forestry techs, wildlife biologists, rec techs. So if they help in fire, then it's a collateral duty. And, in the late 80s and early 90s, there weren't any full-time fire positions in the East, hardly. And so everybody helped in fire. Everybody, pitched in, and when you had fires, everybody went to help. And as the fire workforce has become professionalized and more dedicated, then some places rely on their collateral duty militia type folks more than others. It's a huge part of the eastern United States. Region 8, Region 9 still rely heavily on their militia and collateral duty workforce, from everything from fighting fire to prescribed burning. It's not as common or as big in the West outside of operations, right?
Yeah, I would agree. I fought tooth and nail to actually get on the local militia for the El Dorado National Forest when I first started really getting into public information is
Right.
what I have. And you know, I've done some time on pickup crews and this and that, but it seems like out in the East, at least, that they're way more supportive of people, you know, having that collateral duty of being a wildland firefighter in addition to other jobs, which I think is really important these days when we're running, you know, these large fire seasons that we've been having recently and not being able to get enough resources.
Exactly. And I think also in the East, they're valued a lot more. Um, and, you know, I worked places in the West where they did not encourage or support militia folks helping with fire, and unless it was stuff other than operations like you talked about. And you know, some places were more proactive about it than others. Like when I worked on the Klamath, they had a great program there where they would ask militia folks to boost on the rappel crews, and that was awesome. I mean, so that was really cool. And there were a lot of militia folks in timber who then would boost off the rappel helitack crews, but that's a rarity, I think, and I think even more rare today.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But so you did mention that, you know, you started in timber and then you just fell in love with fire. So I'm really curious, you know, in your time, like what really told you that this was the career for me? Like what were the experiences that you had that really inspired you to want to pursue this type of career?
I really liked the physical challenge of it. I mean, I'd always been really active, and I was really pleased that I could keep up, right? That I could do that, that came pretty easy to me. I also really loved the camaraderie. Gosh, I loved being on a crew. I just loved it. I loved, you know, that bond forging with people, and under those arduous conditions and the fun.
It's a
Um,
family.
yeah, it's a total family. I mean, I
Um,
remember getting off fire assignments and going home and being really lonely, you know. And but I also, you know, growing up as a kid in the Midwest with in a family that didn't have a lot of money, you know, we didn't travel. And gosh, fighting fire really opened up that, also being able to go to just some amazing places. I'd never been to the West. You know, I'd never been west of Chicago. And so being able to just go to these amazing places on fire assignments and realizing that if I moved into fire, I could do a lot of that, it really, really, really appealed to me. So those were the three primary things that I really liked about it.
Yeah, it's like a free ticket to explore some of the most amazing places you'd never get
Oh,
to otherwise, you know?
exactly.
That's what I love about it.
Yeah, you'd never see it. You'd never go there as a tourist, you know? And so, yeah, I really love, that's one of the things I love about it still.
And you really get to integrate with the local communities too, depending, you know, more some depending on what your qualifications are and position when you're out on fire. But that's what I always really enjoyed is like really getting to feel like the community itself and feeling like we're actually by being here as outsiders in wildland fire, we're helping this community kind of get back on its feet during a really traumatic time.
Right. And gosh, every region certainly has its culture, but even a lot of towns and states have their own culture, and being exposed to that as well. You know, I just think,
Absolutely.
yeah, it just gives everybody, you know, it gives you that dose of humanity, right?
Mhm.
Just,
Yeah.
you know, see how other people live and work and function, and what, you know, what their cool stuff is. And yeah, so I mean, I'm a big proponent of travel for all those reasons.
Me too. It makes the world, at least my world, feel so much smaller and
Yeah,
insignificant compared to what else is going on out there in the country.
right, right.
Um, And I think that's really important perspective to have with traveling, even if it's out of country. I know you do a lot of out of country
Yeah.
abroad travels yourself. But that's yeah, there's something really just really special to feel like, wow, yeah, the world is a lot larger.
Yeah. Right, right. But my boss told me, and my boss's boss told me, "You will never promote here. You will never promote in place. So you need to come to terms with that right now. And if you decide to stay here, you will never promote. However, we will support you and encourage you to move on and go other places." And that was kind of drummed into all of our heads. It wasn't so much for the technicians, because you still need that local knowledge, right? The locals who probably grew up there, then get a job there and really know that area. And then having that mix of people who've moved other places and bring different perspectives and different viewpoints. And so they told people in those professional series, like, hey, you got to move. And they were right. I mean, nobody, you didn't even, they would tell you, don't even apply for this job. You're not going to get it.
Make a really good solid point, Riva, that and this is what I tell folks when I'm trying to mentor as well and helping people develop, their career paths, that you can't stay in one place if you want to promote sometimes. That's just not how it happens. Like you have to move around at least in the first half of your career.
Yes. Yes, you're exactly right, Becky. And I think you make a good point about early in your career, because I know a lot of people, I don't want to leave my family. You can come back, right?
You can
Um,
always come back.
you can always come back. And I know so many people who have done that. And I also, like, I know a lot of people who are in really terrible work situations. They have a terrible supervisor or a toxic, office or whatever. And they're like, well, I'm not mobile. And I tell them, then you don't have a lot of options, right?
You
And
don't. Yeah.
and well, I have children, I have a spouse. Well, we did too, 20, 25 years
Yeah.
ago. I mean, we all did. And so
Hmm.
it's just kind of getting your mindset that way, which that was pounded into me from day one. So I always knew that that was something I would have to do. And as a kid who grew up in the same house my whole life, you know, that was a weird dynamic for me. But I really embraced it. I moved around a lot in my career. I'm so glad that I did. For one thing, it just exposes you to different things and how people do things differently. And you can see what works, what doesn't work. But also, I've built this great community all over the country, and expanded
Yes.
my friends, my colleagues, my mentors, my opportunities. You get so many more opportunities. And so,
And
gosh, I'm just
resources. I mean, people that can be a good resource for you later on down the road too.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I feel like if I drove across country, I'd have somewhere to stay every night from someone I've met, working and all that. But yeah, so I can't say enough about it. I really feel bad for people who just don't want to do that or don't think they can do it, because I think they're selling themselves short.
Yeah, I fully agree, and that's why I always advocate for people to look beyond, where you're at,
Mhm.
like physically, location wise. There are so many opportunities out there, and it's only going to do you good if you're in a career to move to different locations and get those outside perspectives.
Right. And I mean, I know, particularly when I think of single parents, that's probably the most difficult, because if they live somewhere where they have family support to help raise their child or children, that's pretty big. And I understand how hard that might be. But I think for the most part, people can do it. But also, what I tell people, if they are just hell bent on not moving, then I really encourage them to take, details, to take a 120-day detail, 6-month detail to a different place. And that then has that exposure, and to make that sacrifice for 3 or 4 months, to do everything in their power that they can do to at least get a little taste of that moving around and exposure to different areas, different units, different offices, all that.
You're only going to develop more skills to put in your tool belt too. So
When I look at a resume and I see they've spent their entire career in one place, I don't often get a great feeling about a person like that.
I would agree with you.
Mhm.
After being a hiring manager for many years, I can definitely see where that is, because it without all the experiences that I've had working on different forests and doing details throughout my 21 years with the Forest Service, I don't think I would have been as an effective program manager when I got up to that GS 12 level.
Right. Totally agree. Yeah.
So Riva, let's shift gears a little bit. And I'm really curious because you started your wildland fire career back when women in fire were very, very rare, to say the least. I mean, compared to these days. So if you can give us maybe a little bit of just some perspective of what you think the challenges to being a woman in this field that you see today.
Yeah, when I first started, there weren't a lot of women in fire, and then hit a period of time where the numbers came up, right? The Forest Service was actively recruiting women in fire. Part of that was due to the consent decree, which was not a great thing. It did give women opportunities they didn't have before in wildland fire. Unfortunately, right now, Becky, the numbers of women are actually down and plummeting. So we've passed our peak and we're now on the downhill slide, which is really, really disconcerting.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that.
Yeah, really disconcerting. But,
Yes.
first started, so yeah, there weren't a lot of women. And I remember the first time seeing a woman single resource on a fire, I was like blown away. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was the coolest thing. And it was twice. It was two women, and it was in Oregon. And then, the more I ended up either fighting fire in Oregon or Washington or being with those resources in other places, gosh, man, the Pacific Northwest had a lot more women, it seemed, on their crews and modules and engines and things. And I thought that was really awesome.
I feel the
But
same too about Region 5, which is where originally came
yeah,
from, California. There was a lot more diversity and
yes.
women in the field, and in my 21 years I saw it grow. So it
Yeah.
is really concerning that nationally overall it's declining in the amount of women here, and women need to realize that this is a job, anybody can do if you're willing to put in the sacrifice and are willing to be physically fit to do the job. It's an amazing job, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, gosh, when I was on the Hot Shot crew, now that was 1996. And I remember overhearing this group of young men, younger than me, on that crew bashing women and saying that women had no business belonging in fire. These were guys on my crew. A couple of these guys were guys that I could do way more push-ups and way more pull-ups than.
Yeah, not cool. Do you think they were like intimidated?
Yeah, I think they were threatened. I think and when I think a lot about this, and I think a lot about this all the time, still to this day, about why some men are still so resistant, I think because it's still seen as this bastion of masculinity, right? That you've got to be tough and you got to be strong, and if a woman can do it, and if she can do it as well or is better than me, then that diminishes my masculinity and my identity as a man. That's
Yeah,
my theory.
it's an ego issue.
Yeah, an
Because
ego
I've
issue.
met plenty of men that are wildland firefighters, including my husband, that have zero ego. And as long as, you're a person that can keep up, they don't care. But yeah, I think that is something that's been ingrained into the climate of
Yeah.
women in fire that I thought was changing, but maybe you can give me a different perspective.
Yeah, we had a lot of pioneers. I mean, there are women who came before me, like the first women on hotshot crews, the first woman smoke jumper, the first women who were FMOs. And they put up with so much. I mean, oh my gosh, the stories would just, are astounding that they hung in there, right? That they stuck it out. And a lot of them
Yeah.
felt like they had to because they were paving the way. And, it was a little bit better by the time I got there, but still, like I said, these are guys in my own hotshot crew. Luckily, my hotshot soup loved having women on his crew, and he was older. He was in his 40s. He'd seen women who were great firefighters. His wife was a firefighter. And he said, I'd much rather have women on the crew because I don't need the posturing and the testosterone soaked attitudes and women think differently. And, he said, I will never go back to having an all male crew. I won't, and that was really cool. And
Yeah.
thankfully there were people like him out there, and there still are. But
Because it changes the vibe. I think having
totally,
females on a crew definitely changed the vibe, and it kind of tones down that testosterone somewhat. I mean, I
I mean,
can't,
yeah.
say for all crews out there, but that's been my experience with the people I've talked to and my own experiences too.
Yeah, I think it's hard if you're the only woman, especially on a 20-person crew. But if you can get it two or three, and gosh, when I'm looking at social media and I look at crew photos, I'm zooming in to see how many women on those
Yeah.
crews. I'm just, not shocked. I'm just still sad every time I see, a 20-person crew with no women. And there are a lot of them out there,
And
and I,
and as a caveat, I just want to say, like, and this is coming from my husband who was in Wildland Fire, like he was a hot shot. I mean, he's retired now medically, but he always said that some of the women on the crews that he's worked with were some of the best firefighters, actually, because they put in the work. And maybe it's for me, I started in trails, and it was
mhm,
kind of the same thing where I was
yeah,
like the only woman on the trail crew, but it kind of toned it down. But when they realized that, hey, like you can keep up and do the work, sometimes that, goes a long way with those folks.
it does. And, from that, we know we have to work harder, right? And we can't complain. And, you know, that's just part of it to prove that we deserve to be there. And then I just learned that I just did my work, did my job and did it well.
Okay, so we're running short on time, but I really wanted to ask you. So now that you're retired, from wildland firefighting, you have been an extreme advocate for the Grassroots Wildland Fire nonprofit organization. So, can you tell me how that organization is paving the way for the future of firefighting?
Sure. So this organization, it's a nonprofit, was started in 2019 by Kelly Martin, who at that time was chief of fire and aviation at Yosemite National Park. Lucas Mayfield, who had been a longtime hotshot in Region 6 and then left for the sake of his mental health and his family life, right? And he works for Mystery Ranch Backpacks now. And another guy named Marcus Cornwall, who's an FMO in Region 3. And they met at a fire conference and started talking about all the challenges and all the things that are broken about it, and said, let's start an organization. And they did, and they recruited some other folks to be part of it, and submitted their nonprofit stuff with the IRS, and really kind of went off to the races. And I just started hearing about them and started trying to get the word out about the organization. And after I retired, and I had mandatory retirement. So with fire and law enforcement in the federal government, we have mandatory retirement. And I really did not want to retire. I just felt like I still had a lot to offer and still things I wanted to do. So that was tough to retire. But they reached out to me a couple of months later and asked me if I would join their board. And so I was really excited to do that because I believed in everything they were doing. And so we've been able to, accomplish a lot. We've worked with some other advocacy groups and other nonprofits who support wildland firefighters. But I think the timing was really good because I do know within the Forest Service, the previous fire director, Tom Harbor, really tried hard to get a firefighter series and just met with obstacles at every turn, right? Both internally in the Forest Service with Office of Personnel Management, and so I get asked, well, how have you all been able to do so much in such a short amount of time? And I think that, first of all, being outside of the agency, there's a lot more we can do. I'm not constrained by what I can say, right?
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
that helps. We can talk to the media, we can talk to legislators, and so that's a big part of it. Second, I think with just the change in fires, due to climate change, with longer fire seasons, losing entire communities now. The campfire that burned down Paradise. The year before, we had those fires in Napa. We had the car fire. And I
Yeah.
think those were kind of, that wake up call. And so I think all of that coming together, the timing was just really right. And by Grassroots then being able to get our challenges and our story out to the public, who had no idea that we didn't get paid worth crap, you know, and government employees in general don't get paid very well. So we've been pretty successful at getting some legislators like Representative Nagoose and gosh, I'm drawing a blank on her name, but she's out of California, Katie Porter, Representative Porter, Liz Cheney, been great. And we have a legislative affairs person. We have Michelle Hart who helps us. And another big thing is we've gotten journalists to take up our cause, who have a passion for it. It's not just a story. They believe in our advocacy, and keeping us out there in the media, I think, has been just huge with the court of public opinion. So that's my little nutshell about Grassroots. And, we're advocating for an expanded workforce even beyond fire. I mean, we
And that's
understand,
what we need right now.
yeah, we understand that everybody, due to budget cuts and financing wars, and everybody's doing more with less, and everybody, we have fewer positions in every resource area now. And we, to do more prescribed burning, we need biologists to do the analysis. We need the archaeologists. We need the
Mhm.
foresters. We need more of a workforce for everybody to do the work that we know we need to do, for
Yes,
system health and hazardous fuel reduction. So yeah.
absolutely. And that's what part of the mission of Life in the Wildlands is, to help recruit new blood and younger folks into these careers because we need it more than ever. And it's really unfortunate where the agencies are at right now with staffing. So, the last question I want to ask you is, for those that are seeking a career in wildland fire, especially women,
Mhm.
do you have any advice you would want to give them? Or is there anything you would have known sooner in your career that you want to share?
I would say that, try to, first of all, you got to get on social media and join those groups, and get that exposure. And I would also say, do a little bit of homework. First of all, don't be afraid to move, like you and I were saying. It's going to be easier for you to get a job in a place that's not as popular, right? Everybody wants to live in Bend, Oregon, or
Yeah.
everybody wants to live in Tahoe, right? But look for those entry level positions in places that are more isolated, maybe less desirable, like Happy Camp. I worked on the Klamath.
Yeah. I was
Oh,
gonna say because I did my time. I got my permanent position on the Six Rivers, which
yeah,
was
there you go.
administrating part of the Klamath on the Yukon, and that's
Right.
out in the middle of nowhere.
Out in the middle of nowhere. But you
But
probably had a blast, didn't you?
best thing I could have done, and it
Exactly.
was sacrificing a few years, of my life,
Sure.
and actually enjoyed it there. But
Until yeah. Yeah. And so that's one thing. And then look for opportunities, like be a sponge, and also diversify yourself. So I have always encouraged fire people, well, if you really, if you have a degree in biology or wildlife or, engineering or whatever, then ask those folks if you can work with them through the winter, or when season's slow, and get that diversified experience and build your mentorship and build your wolf pack of people outside of fire. Diversify yourself there too. And also in fire, like I just stayed in operations forever, and then I got injured and there was nothing else I could do, right? I had
yeah,
no other calls. And so also within fire, expand your your qualifications and your experience and your training. Like you did public affairs, do public affairs or logistics or planning, and
Get a
just look.
rounded experience.
And I think women are worse. I've hear more women say, "Oh, I can't put in for that job. I'm not qualified or I'm not ready." Where I never hear a guy say that, right? And so
Yeah.
I also try to encourage women, well, give it a shot, especially if it's a detail. Try it, and you might surprise yourself and throw your hat in the ring, right?
Yeah.
Take a chance on yourself.
I fully agree. And I think being a woman in a male dominated field, it is intimidating sometimes, but I don't know. I think if you land in the right spot and people will come around, but you have to, if the environment is toxic, then go somewhere else,
Right.
And I know I've had to do that time and time, but for the most part, I mean, I've, haven't experienced too much of the male domination, I guess you could say, but it's a very rewarding career if you want to
Yeah,
get it.
it really is. And so, that's another thing that if you move around, work other places, you find out and you hear the good crews and the good mods. You also hear about the really toxic ones,
Mhm.
right? And get that exposure, or you at least know who you can ask and who you can trust to give you a good answer about it.
Yeah, no, it's been great talking with you, Riva. Do you have any other last words you want to share with our audience?
No, I think the service you're providing, Becky, is huge and people should definitely rely on you. I've offered to just take a look at people's resumes and I'm always surprised when people turn me down. Not that I'm great at it, but have someone look at your resume, and bounce some things off of it. It's always nice to have fresh eyes or a fresh perspective. And, your experience that you've had and being, like I said, moving up to being a hiring manager, we know what we're looking for,
Yeah.
so yeah, you reach out for help. It's okay to ask for help. And, it's our system with USA Jobs. It's not the best, but there's a lot of people out there willing to help. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Life in the Wildlands, we will provide a half-hour career consultation just to go over what your needs are. If you're needing advice on your resume, getting started, or where you need to go, we are here. So give us a call. For more stories about outdoor careers, subscribe to the Life in the Wildlands podcast, where I will be interviewing outdoor professionals to discover exciting opportunities in outdoor careers, share professional experiences, discuss the hurdles to federal employment, and provide advice on how to overcome these challenges. And if you're interested in outdoor jobs and don't know where to start, or if you already are a federal employee with the outdoor career that's struggling to make it to the next level in your career development, Life in the Wildlands can help you on your journey. Check out our career counseling and federal resume development services at www.lifeinthewildlands.com or call 406-848-1660.